Hi, Stephen. Joe.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Erica, have you heard from Sarah?
I have. I resent her the link. I think people were looking for the link in the way that I usually do it, but I had sent it. I had included it in the body of the Outlook invite that I had sent out. So, but I sent it to her separately.
Okay, because some people have stuff to do at 3, I think, right around 3.
Yep. Just hoping she'll jump in.
I'm not telling you to do it.
Are we anticipating all of our board members?
No, Matt had responded that he is not coming. And Peter McEachern also declined.
What about Rita?
She actually didn't respond.
Should we start, or do we probably need to wait for Sarah? Libby's shaking her head. Yes, we should start, or yes, we should wait for Sarah.
Do I have her? Let me see if I have her cell phone.
I have her cell phone if you need me to text her.
I've got it.
We also need John Giorgio. Did he get the link? He probably did, right? Giorgio?
Yeah, and he accepted.
Okay.
I was going to say that I couldn't find the link to the reposted meeting in my inbox, but I found it in calendar. It was strange.
Well, that's where it is. It's in your. It was part of an Outlook calendar invite.
Yeah, so maybe they're looking in their inbox and just finding the old link, because that's what I did first. That was just.
Well, maybe somebody can text Sarah and John and ask them. where they are.
I just texted John. John, do you mind texting Sarah?
Here she comes. She's coming on.
And Chris
John-
Glowacki just called me, and he's on his way in as well.
And some of the FinCom never accepted, so.
Chris Glowacki's on
Chris-
his way in. George
Okay.
is supposed to.
Yeah, because I didn't hear back from Chris, George, Jill.
I texted everybody, so everybody does know about it, Eric.
Okay.
Just kind of waiting for John. Well, maybe we should just start, and we can. I wanted John to go over his memo because he explains it way better than I do. Although Brian might be able to help with that, and Sarah too. So
Here comes John.
if everybody's okay, we can just get going. So if FinCom and Select Board want to individually call themselves to order.
Sure.
Denise is on mute.
I'll call the May 12th Select Board meeting to order. I suppose I need to do that by roll call. Do we need to go through the whole Zoom thing? Is this being televised?
It is.
Okay, I do not
can
have
probably-
all of those notes, but can I paraphrase it a little bit?
Yeah.
We're meeting under Governor Baker's order, I think it's of March, was it March 12th? Remotely, we are able to waive some of the requirements of the open meeting law due to COVID-19. And everything is being recorded. This meeting will not actually have public participation, but it will be publicly viewable or recorded. And everything we will be doing by roll call vote. This is a joint meeting. I will be chairing in conjunction with Denise Crownow. And please raise your hand when you wish to be recognized. And we'll be calling on certain people throughout to go through pieces of the agenda. And by roll call, I'm going to call my board members in the order in which I see you. Jason Bridges.
Here.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
And Don Holgate, aye. We are missing the other two. And I will turn it over to Denise.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, this is, I'm calling to order the FinCom meeting of May 12th, and by roll call in the order in which I see you all. So I will confirm your attendance. So Pete Afer,
Here. Here.
I think we lost Denise.
Stephen?
Here.
Am I still there? Okay, Stephen. Yep. Joe Grouse? Joe, you have to take yourself off mute. Hit the space bar.
Got it. Here.
Thank you. Jill Veith?
Here.
Chris Klawacki?
Here.
Joanna Roche?
Here.
Thank you. Okay, and I'll turn it back over to Dawn. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, I should also say everyone else who's on here. We have Erica Mooney, Michael Kozort, Libby Gibson,
Here.
Nancy Holmes, Beth Hallett. Can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Sarah Alger, Brian Turbot,
Here.
Alexandria Penta, and John Giorgio.
Yep.
Okay. How shall we begin? Libby?
Okay, so Rita just texted she's not able to join. So a group of us have been trying to figure out when and how we should have a town meeting, or what would be the most optimal thing. So ultimately today, if the select board and the FinCom, it'll be ultimately up to the select board, but with FinCom input and perhaps some discussion, could settle on a date, we would like that so that we can get planning, do public outreach, things of that nature. So most recently, we had a meeting yesterday. You all have a little bit of an outline from me. It's called 2020 Annual Town Meeting Logistics. There's also a memo in the packet from Town Council, which basically outlines the sort of timing issues with the election and the town meeting, and what the basically what the various issues are with having town meeting after the election, which is not what we normally do. So we've made some assumptions, assuming, and with a couple of different scenarios, and some of this work is not yet complete, but our assumption is that one scenario would be attendees of between 300 and 500 people. A second scenario would be between 500 and 700 people. Non-voters will not be permitted to attend. We will approach this as a pared down town meeting with only doing essential articles critical to town operations or the budget. All other articles will be pushed off to a later time, whether that's a special in the fall or even the following 2021 annual town meeting. Remains to be seen. We would assume this town meeting for the pared down version would last one day or night, evening, afternoon, whatever time we determine to have it. And we'd like to figure out how to have a kind of a pre-town meeting before the annual town meeting. Some of you might know that yesterday Chatham had a community forum on Zoom webinar, and I watched maybe about half an hour of it. It was really interesting. Erica was looking into it today to see just how we might make this work. I mean, if one town can do it, there's no reason why others can't do it. So that is a potential option. We would probably want to partner with the Civic League, maybe even the Town Association or Nantucket Community Association, groups like that could help us moderate it and, kind of help figure it out. But the idea would be to go over what we're intending to do for town meeting. There will probably be people who don't feel comfortable or safe attending town meeting before fall, maybe even, or perhaps definitely even before summer really gets kicked off, to the extent that it's going to get kicked off. And we want people to really understand what we're trying to get at, these essential articles only for now, but then what will happen to the rest of the articles, the citizen articles and the non-critical. So we have made some date recommendations for town meeting. They are listed in the outline. I won't go over all of them, but the earliest one would be potentially any day the week of June 22nd. We have met with the school about this. That's a bit of a push, but it's doable. And then we have a lot of evaluation and a sort of like assessments that need to be done for a town meeting in the COVID era. much more complicated than a regular town meeting. So we have a kind of a facilities group that's looking at a whole bunch of things having to do with facilities, a technology group, and a kind of attendee group, logistics group. There are some outstanding items that we don't need to necessarily decide today, but that some point sort of soon we'll have to determine. They're listed in the packet. Are we still going to have a special town meeting in the fall? That could be difficult potentially because we don't quite know what's going to be happening with schools. What would we put on the November election ballot? Would we consider a special town election outside of the November ballot, depending on what happens with the June 16th election? And then potentially what happens with the articles that are companion to the ballot questions. So listed at the end of this outline is what we like to get from the select board and the FinCom. A new date is the most important if we can reach that today. And then there's some other things that in the coming weeks leading up to whenever we have town meeting that would need to be done, including new motions for certain articles, agreeing to pare down the town meeting to all but the most critical, and so on. So I wanted John to just maybe, John, quickly give a little overview of your memo, which is in the packet, so that people have a good sense of the timing issues. And by the way, this pre-town meeting sort of conference thing that I talked about, that could also be an opportunity for us to explain the ballot questions, since it's going to be backwards this year. It would let us explain them before the election. We have to be careful because you are not supposed to spend town resources or funds on anything to do with ballot questions. Prop 2.5 ballot questions.
All right, can you all hear me now? So essentially, because Nantucket has already posted its warrant, which by the way is a combined election warrant and annual town meeting warrant, the only way that it can be postponed is by a declaration of recess by the moderator. And those are under the new law, those can be made successively. And I know that there's already been at least one, if not two, declarations by Sarah to continue on town meeting within a 30-day period. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that ability to declare successive continuances goes away once the governor, 30 days after the governor has lifted the declaration of emergency. So it is certainly possible that we could all be caught a little bit flat-footed if that were to happen, although we doubt that's likely to happen. So when you all decide when you want to have town meeting, then Sarah could continue to make the declarations of continuance until we get to town meeting. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that, well, under the law, you normally would have to hold your town meeting by June 30th. Chapter 53, which is the new law providing municipal relief, says that you can actually continue to, you can schedule your town meeting after June 30th, and there's no end date other than if the emergency order is lifted. If you do that, and I'm just going to make this up, if you decide to hold your annual town meeting in August, for example, the law allows the town to submit to DOR a spending plan for approval, which would allow the town to spend a minimum of 1/12 of its last year's operating budget during the month of July. And that provision also allows you to have spending plans to cover any additional months that you might need. So for example, if you submitted a spending plan for July and August, and then you had your town meeting in August, you should be good to go. I won't get into all the technical issues in my memo about the municipal finance provisions, but there are provisions that would allow you to use your certified free cash that you currently have. That would be available for appropriation even if your town meeting is held in August. Um, you also have the ability to continue your revolving accounts until you hold at last year's spending limits, that is, until you actually hold your annual town meeting. We just received a number of guidances from DOR on the specifics about how all these provisions may work. And I think the plan is for Brian and Libby and I to get together and make sure that, we have everything covered in that spending plan that we may need. Now, if you do hold your town meeting on June 22nd or anytime before June 30th, and presuming the budget passes, then you will be in good shape. So the two options that I discussed in my memo would be, the first one would be to schedule town meeting after June 30th. So let's say it's the August 22nd date. You would, the problem that you may potentially run into is your annual election is scheduled for June 16th, and you cannot schedule that beyond June 30th. So you're going to have your election in June. You could put it out a few weeks, but it has to be held in June. And the 7 ballot questions that are on the warrant, on the ballot, will be voted on at that annual election. So if all of those ballot questions pass, then you'll be in good shape on August 22nd to do the appropriations that are associated with each of those ballot questions. And although that's the reverse order of the way you would normally do it, you can certainly do it that way. It's legal to do it that way. If some of them fail, and depending upon which ones fail at the June election, and that could be, as Libby was alluding to, could be the fact that the voters really didn't have an opportunity to debate and fully comprehend the purposes of those votes because you didn't have your town meeting forum or your town meeting as a forum for debate. You can always repeat those ballot questions at a later date. So under this scenario, the ballot questions fail. You have your town meeting on August 22nd, and the town meeting portion of those appropriations pass. You could call a special election to try to get approval of those ballot questions through a second bite of the apple. The other option is that by the first Wednesday in August, you can request the Secretary of State to place 3 Proposition 2.5 questions on the November election warrant. That's the state election. So that is an option you should keep in the back of your minds, depending upon the outcome of the ballot questions at the June election. The second option would be for you to hold a town meeting before June 30th. And again, that might, whatever that date might be before June 30th, and even potentially do a further rescheduling of the election so that ideally the election would occur after the annual town meeting, which would give the voters that opportunity to fully understand those questions. And then under that scenario, you probably would want to substantially pare down your warrant for the annual town meeting. The idea being it's June, it's warm, the virus is still here, so you would want to get in and out of town meeting as quickly as possible. And fortunately in Nantucket, you have the process that you go through at every town meeting where the moderator reads the articles and any voter can call them. A particular article, and then you pass everything else in one vote. And then the normal procedure would be that you would then go back and take up each of the called articles one by one. What you could do at this June annual town meeting, however, is after the non-called articles are voted, You could take a 10-minute recess, have the select board and the finance committee decide which articles, for example, petitioned articles, maybe zoning articles, maybe some of the land, real estate articles, and simply move to pass over them in one vote. I move to pass over articles X, Y, and Z. That way you could further pare down that warrant and potentially only have a handful left that are, I mean, if somebody calls the budget article, for example, you would have to deal with that. So that would be the way to minimize the length of town meeting. And I would certainly recommend to the select board that if you want to go that route, you should make it clear to the petitioners that you will voluntarily agree to place those articles on the next town meeting warrant as a courtesy to those petitioners, so that they wouldn't have to go out and get new signatures. The trick there is if it's a special town meeting, they would need 100 rather than 10 signatures. So you would want to do some outreach to the petitioners, I think, to see if they would be comfortable enough not calling any of the petitioned articles, with an assurance by the board that they will get before town meeting at the next special or annual. So that's basically the summary of your options, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Yes.
Just a quick question. One of the reasons to have town meeting before June 30th has to do with the airport. Brian, could you and/or John explain the airport problem, please?
The biggest problem at the airport is relative to a capital article that they have, which is supplemental funding for the security system. Supplemental funding on the warrant is $4,030,250. It's my understanding, based on discussions the airport has had with the FAA, if we don't have that supplemental funding authorized by June 30th, they will lose the grant funding that is going with that supplemental authorization. That project is the security system upgrade project, is a $6 million project, which $2,093,000 was approved at last year's annual town meeting, which they have already started that particular phase. The $4 million is a supplemental funding for the remaining phase and remaining work that has been added and required from the FAA. And without that town meeting, we would lose the funding, and then they would still be potentially required to do this project, and it would be needed to be funded 100% by airport revenues, and it's a $4 million project. So there is some risk that we would incur. I've asked the airport director to reach out to their contacts at the FAA and see if we weren't able to hold the meeting prior to June 30th, if we held it relatively quickly after the first of the year, if it potentially wouldn't be a problem. And he wasn't sure if they would agree to it, but he was willing to reach out and try to talk to them. But that would be a substantial issue for the airport, right, that they would have.
Denise?
I was looking at the calendar based on John's memo that he sent us, and I was just doing a calculation, basically saying if we had annual town meeting on June 27th, then had the election on June 30th, and we notified people by May 27th that we were moving the elections, we had to give them 20 days notice. So 20 days from June 16th backwards is May 27th. Then we could still get it done in June. So that was just one of the things that I was wondering if we had an appetite for.
Oh, Libby?
I would want to hear from the town clerk about that, because traditionally having the election and the town meeting that close together is logistically extremely difficult.
Nancy? Oh, you're muted, Nancy.
Yes, it would be extremely difficult, and my concern would be that if under good circumstances, it's just difficult to switch it over. But if we went over on the 27th, then I'd be really concerned. If we had to, meet a subsequent day, 3 days would be really tough because we might potentially be needing to finish the town meeting and setting up for the annual town election at virtually the same time.
I just to throw this out there, does anyone think that anything's going to be any different between now and June 30th? Because I don't. I actually think it might be worse by having more and more people arriving on the island. So I just wonder if, Chris Glowacki. You're muted. Chris, you're muted.
Yeah, I know. I was trying. It just wasn't clicking off. Thanks, Don. Well, I was going to ask, and I'm sorry if I missed something in the packet. I mean, are we under governor orders about the size of gatherings now? And is town meeting somehow exempt from that? Or we're just presuming that's going to go away?
No, the original COVID order by the governor that established the 10-person limit expressly exempts municipal legislative bodies.
Okay. That being said, though, if you look at the governor's rollout plan and opening plan, I know that deals mostly with commerce, and I just saw the one today right before this meeting, and you look at his various stages. I mean, the type of gathering that a town meeting is, I would put in the riskiest category in stage 4, whatever that is. I would equate it to a sporting event. I mean, I can't imagine we're talking about putting people, 300 to 500 people in a room together in June or July or August. I mean, all of whom, other than Christy and Jason, are high risk. I'm a little bit surprised by this conversation. I just don't think it's doable.
What are other towns going to do? Maybe John or.
So I just happened to I was developing a list today, trying to keep it straight, Dawn. But as of today, and of course this changes daily, most towns that I represent are still sticking with the June town meeting as late as June 23rd. And with the exception of Provincetown, which is bit the bullet and is going with September 24th. Now, how realistic is it that these towns will actually have their town meetings on those dates? I tend to think, I would not be surprised if there was further postponements on all of these, to be honest with you.
So, Joe?
Just a question for, I don't know if for John or for Libby, is there any ability to have a video town meeting? I mean, does it have to be an in-person process?
I can answer that question, Dawn. There is a bill that's pending that actually passed in the Senate that would allow remote participation, but only if it's a representative town meeting form of government. If you have an open town meeting, there's no option but everybody to get in the room together. Now, could that change? It certainly could. There's lots of discussion about trying to come up with a remote participation model that would actually work, but as of today, it does not exist.
Can I follow up? What about an outdoor location like the football stadium, as opposed to trying to use the auditorium and other, inside space at the schools, in the schools?
Nancy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe that anything we use, well, I'm sure that it does, has to be ADA approved. So we can't do a field. I think we could do outside on solid ground, say a parking lot in a tent. I'm pretty sure that could be done, but we'd have to have obviously power, Wi-Fi, all those things. We've reached out to the Boys and Girls Club because their gym is so much larger than the one at the high school. Because what we're thinking is that if we do it at the high school, we have to use different rooms, the Mary Walker, potentially the 2 gyms, and the Phyllis at the Boys and Girls Club is sort of tacitly interested in allowing us to use the space, depending on the date, of course. So that's a possibility there. But I just wanted to add, my own 2 cents based on what Mr. Giorgio just said about the possibility of the June dates being postponed. It seems a little risky. I myself was sort of daydreaming about the possibility of August to have it done before the 2 fall elections are scheduled, just from my own point of view. But I just want to add one other thing. Because of the social distancing limitations of the town meeting as it stands now, I think we really have to strongly consider a time when the kids aren't going to be present in the building for a few days, for the sake of sanitation for the schools, whether it be June, August, or the beginning of a long weekend. I hate to say it. I think it's going to be a nightmare for the school if we have town meeting in there, if the kids have to be present soon thereafter. That's just my own thought.
Jill had her hand up before.
Yeah, I just wanted to underscore what Dawn said, that I don't know how this changes and why September is some magical month, I guess. So I hear what you're saying, Nancy. I think that's a really credible point. When kids are in school, actually, it could be worse. It could be harder on you and make everybody even more nervous. So I feel like what you all do is really important. And I definitely think this election is super important to get that done. I mean, it seems odd already that we have, some people in office who aren't, they've passed their date. I find that makes me nervous. So I definitely would like to see that done personally. Town meeting, I understand the restrictions, but I don't see, until we have a cure, this is like every meeting we're having, unless there's a cure or virus, we can't push this off until that date comes. And Anthony Fauci was just appearing before the Senate yesterday, and he said, hey, I'm not sure the vaccine's even going to work. So I think we've got to be realistic, and that's all. Thank you.
I really don't want to postpone the election any further. I think we're just going to have to deal with it with the articles and them not being discussed prior to being voted on, and we'll put them on another ballot, or we might decide to make some changes based on the state of the world on what we're asking for. But the most critical thing is the airport, it sounds like, but the whole town budget's kind of an issue. I mean, it'd be nice if we could figure out a way to do this where people kind of trust us to represent them and don't show up. But Jason?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Libby and Brian, and maybe John Giorgio. What are the minimum amount of articles that we would need to pass to just function? I know it's problematic to have citizen warrant articles passed on to the fall without having any control. What's the minimum? Like, what are we talking about just to function after July 1st? Is it 3 articles? Is it the first 10?
So if I may, it's obviously the general fund operating budget. It's all of your enterprise fund operating budgets. I don't know if there are any CPA articles that would be deemed critical. You have your capital, both enterprise fund and the general fund. Again, you'd have to make some judgments about whether there's anything in those that are critical to be passed, before June 30th.
I would say the CPA is critical because of the human services parts that are involved in those?
There may be about perhaps between 12 and 15 articles. We'd want to pass Article 7, that's involves seasonal salaries and some other stuff. Article 9, which is Health and Human Services allocation. The CPA, like we said. I guess if we want to keep on, Articles 11, 12, 13, 14, 13 and 14, those are all related to the ballot questions. Newtown Road, Lovers Lane reconstruction, Amelia Drive and Waite Drive, construction and improvements, the Children's Beach Stormwater Pump Station. Like John said, the Enterprise Fund items. There are various reserve fund and revolving fund articles, the ferry embarkation fee appropriation, things like that. Maybe it's closer to 20, but not much more than that. And for the most part, the majority of that is routine articles. There are some articles that if the town admin's budget recommendations are accepted by the board, we're going to need to change a number of these motions. But it would be, we've been kind of going around with the same sort of line of thought, Jason. And, things like Harbor Place professional services, would we proceed with that one? That's Article 29. Land bank refinancing, or the land bank financing article, would we do that? We'd probably have to go through them, and we would probably come up with a list of things that are absolutely critical that must be done to operate in fiscal 21, and those things that could potentially wait. I don't think there'd be much more than 20 of that. Brian, do you agree, or John?
I do agree. I think the only other ones that I would offer that if we were going to take these up would be the Article 6, which is general fund budget transfers, and Article 17, which is enterprise fund budget transfers. John and I have had extensive discussions about potential year-end deficits and how we would deal with them. And DOR has issued guidance on those relative to how you deal with COVID-19 and then how you deal with any revenue deficits in enterprise funds. So those would be something that we would think about. But the question would be, John, if we did have a meeting before June 30th, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would probably need to deal with the revolving accounts because we had a meeting before June 30th, right? Because the legislation, if you don't have the meeting before June 30th, would allow the same levels to continue after first starting on July 1st until you had a meeting, right?
Yes. I don't know if you were going to be changing any of those spending limits.
We would have to. The airport specifically would like the fuel revolver substantially lowered based on what they believe to happen in fiscal 21. I don't think, Madam Chair, that it would be more than what the town manager said in terms of 20 articles at max.
Jason?
Thanks for that explanation. Is there a way to categorize those? Because the worry is the public, right? How are they going to see us trying to, sneak things through? What's the bare minimum? Can we put them into 3 categories? Housekeeping, ones that really never get called but allow for functioning after July 1st, and some that we need to talk about and do a lot of outreach on, whether it's a community forum so people feel comfortable passing 15, 20 articles so we can function and moving everything forward. I would like to get this all done by June. I think the election needs to happen soon. It makes me feel weird to be in office when I shouldn't be. So I want to go forward. And if 100 people have to go in the auditorium to pass, and the majority of the public feels comfortable with passing the 15 to 20, I think that's maybe our best option at this point. I might feel differently after I hear from other people.
Denise?
How do you stop the 50 citizens who now have quote unquote live citizen warrant articles to say, sorry, but we're not going to allow you to vote on them this time because we really need to just do 20? Can we say to them, guess what? You get to have them later. You just don't get to have them now. That's because I'm imagining some of the people, knowing how the discussions went, would say, well, mine's really critical, so we have to vote on mine.
John?
So Denise, the way you would deal with that is it's going to depend upon who has the majority vote at town meeting. As I mentioned, you would do the call process, pass everything that's not called, and then the select board or the finance committee could then make a motion to pass over all of the citizen articles. And that requires a majority vote. And if that motion passes, then those articles are disposed of and would have to be put on a warrant for another town meeting.
So
I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, so we would have to do outreach to every person who submitted a citizen's article and tell them we would put it on the next town meeting.
Yeah, because otherwise they'll call them and it'll be a called article on the day and then we have to vote on it, right?
No.
So yeah, John, you keep going out. You give me the answer. I know you've done it before and I keep losing you. So I'm missing all the good stuff.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? So even if they're called, there can still be a motion to pass over those articles. And it requires a majority vote. Did you get that, Denise?
I got it this time. Thank you. See, third time's a charm. Thanks, John.
Libby?
This is why we were recommending this kind of community forum thing for exactly this purpose. The citizen petitioners could all get a letter explaining it. We could potentially have this forum before the election and before town meeting to explain just what it is that we're doing. There will probably be some people who don't trust this. There will probably be the people who Denise referenced who think their article is critical. And we'll have to explain that at whenever the town meeting is. And I guess try to really convince people that we really are dealing with the most critical right now. I would hope that most people would go along with this, especially if they don't have to get signatures and their articles are going to go on as is on whenever the next town meeting is. And but the board will have to, basically promise that.
Oh, Joanna, and then Christy.
So could you offer like a Zoom meeting similar to this with all of the people who submitted citizens articles to explain exactly this to them in this format and give them the sort of confidence level that they might require to support delaying all those until the fall? Because I am inclined to agree that this should just happen sooner rather than later, and that we should bear it, like strip it back to the ones that are critical and move forward. I think that's a good plan. And if we can get it to under 20 articles, how long would that really take? Right.
You might have come in a little bit late, but I said at the very beginning that yesterday Chatham had a Zoom webinar community forum about COVID-19 issues. And Erica was doing a little research this morning about how it went, how it worked, how to set it up. So yes, that is the petitioners could get on, but voters could get on and understand what it is that we're trying to do.
So you guys have the Zoom account where you can have more than 100 people. You don't have to worry about any of those sorts of rules. Yes. Okay.
No, yeah.
And are we within the time limits that make all of this legal?
Yes.
Okay. Christy?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of mention the same thing about how could we do some more public outreach so that the citizens warrant articles, the citizens that submitted them understood the process. And then maybe, I don't know if it's possible to set the town or the fall town meeting, but at least have a date where they might know when their citizen warrant article might be discussed.
We do already have an October 14th date, correct?
We do. But
who knows?
Wednesday, and I don't think we know right now. So that's one of these outstanding issues that's in the outline that I gave you all. Is it going to be feasible to even have a special town meeting in the fall? There's the other national election that's going to be happening, which is going to mess things up a little bit with staffing and the town clerk's ability to manage all of that. This is different times now. These articles, maybe we need to start wrapping our heads around. These articles may have to wait till the 2021 annual town meeting because, as Dr. Fauci and others say, this is not going to be over by the fall.
Nancy?
Just to piggyback on what Libby said, I am now more concerned about the October 14th date because the Secretary of State has a bill going forward, for discussion and possibly vote next week, expanding early voting from the usual 10 to 18 days, including weekends and including in person, which they had prior, eliminated for April because of the person-to-person contact. And I can tell you that all the town clerks are against the way that he's promoted this expansion in this bill, and we're going to speak against it. But who knows what's going to happen? And so that would make it difficult, very difficult for us.
Our little internal group had also talked about the possibility of Saturday, September 26th. And I'm not quite sure what the school's reaction to that was, just basically because there are a lot more logistics involved with using the school once it's in session. There's, deep cleanings before and after. There's still the issue of social distancing. We still might have to use more than one room. I don't even know if the Boys Club would be available at that time. I don't even know if the Boys Club is really a valid place anyway. But there's just, this is 10 times more difficult now than it was before.
Chris, and then Michael Cozart.
Just a quick question. Are there any quorum requirements on any of the necessary articles at annual town meeting?
Not quorum requirements at an annual. There's quorum requirements for certain things at a special. Right now, some of that is relaxed. I don't know if it'll be relaxed into the fall. Maybe John knows a little bit more about that. There's quorum in terms of like 2/3 vote, 4/5 vote, majority vote, but not number of people to be there for an annual.
Okay, thank you.
The bill that I was mentioning earlier, it hasn't been signed into law yet, would, in an open town meeting, allow the select board to reduce the quorum requirement to 10% of what it is. I'm not sure how that's going to work in Nantucket because you have a percentage quorum requirement rather than a hard number. But that bill would severely limit what you could consider at such a town meeting, basically just your budget.
Michael Cozart.
Dawn, is we are now getting lots and lots and lots of questions about how you can manage the crowd at town meeting, and in particular, whether you can require people to have a temperature check, whether you can exclude people from town meeting. I actually had a question today so if we have a quorum requirement of 150, can we close the doors once we reach 150? Now, of course, the answer is no, you can't. The quorum is a minimum, not a maximum. And as to attempting to exclude people from town meeting, if they answer the questions wrong or whatever, we think that's fraught with peril, and it's not something that you should rely upon. You're much better off realistically dealing with distancing, hand sanitizer, and paring down the warrant in order to reduce risk to the voters.
Stephen, but I just wanted to mention that I'm going to lose a quorum at 3:10. So go ahead, Steve.
I guess this is a question for Sarah or maybe for Nancy. Nancy, you mentioned having having town meeting in maybe both gyms, CPS and NHS, and the auditorium. What are the other options? I mean, what's the limitations to how far flung you can have the attendees of town meeting be?
Well, I'm not sure if they're, maybe John could answer. I'm not sure if they're allowed to be in completely different buildings, if that's what you mean, because the warrant is posted for a place. I'd have to defer to Mr. Giorgio on that. But, to affect social distancing, we were discussing the possibility of, as I said, the Mary Walker, the 2 gyms, possibly the LGI, and we would have to have an alternate moderator and clerk in each room, and obviously have to have AV and Wi-Fi capabilities and all of that, which was also promoted the interest to just look into the Boys and Girls Club as a possibility that we could be in one room, possibly.
I forgot to go back to Michael Kozort.
Madam Chair, the school realizes the situation we're in. And any day, I wrote it into the chat, any day in June, July, or August, we will make work. Obviously, the later we get into August, that could be problematic depending on whether we're going to open back up in brick and mortar. I think one of the concerns the group talked about was air conditioning if you do a meeting in June or July. So those are some of the logistics that Libby has tasked to different groups. But we can make any day in June, July, and August, and we can make a Friday night work once the school year starts. Saturday could be a little bit harder because that only gives us Sunday to clean the schools and have them ready for Monday morning. But Friday evening could be a possibility, something to consider if you want it.
Oh, Erica?
I just wanted to note that Matt just joined the meeting, so if somebody
Hi, Matt.
The other point that I would make is that remember that the middle high school is all one building. So if you wanted to use both gyms and the auditorium, I think that would probably work under any statutes, but I would defer to John on that.
Denise, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Dawn, I was wondering if at this point you wanted to at least get a few things decided because it was right before Matt joined, so I think I heard agreements that we all are comfortable with paring down the warrant to the essentials for the first go round. And then do you want to try to get agreement on a date now? Because I'm not sure how much more information is needed to make a decision, and putting off the decision is the decision by definition, right? So I was wondering if we're at a point with all the discussions that we could land on something.
What does everybody think about trying to do it the week following the election, like on the 20th or the 22nd? I mean, and I'm also wondering, like, is everyone on here comfortable with attending themselves?
I'm not sure Chris is saying yes. I think
Chris?
I mean, it would depend on the details, and I think it would have to think through that we might be setting an extraordinarily bad example at the time. And I also just don't think we know what we're going to face. So I'd want to consider what happens if we decide on a date and then are forced to move it, and what our contingencies are. Because my experience over the last 8 weeks has been no decision you make holds for a couple of weeks, and then you're faced with a different sort of circumstances and you're forced to make a different decision.
I guess I'm thinking I wanted to leave us like a week's leeway before that 30th date so we could put other provisions into place once we know kind of where we stand, and maybe the airport can get some special provisions for their situation. And we're going to have a plan B, but at least the election will be done on the 16th.
Yeah, and I think if we land, Dawn, I think if we decide on a date or tentatively decide on a date now, you're deciding with the best information we have at this moment, but it's not written in concrete. So in 4 weeks, if we have to change it, we change it, because that's what you do. So I just would like to see if we could start to, because I think it's almost impossible for the working group and Libby and the administration to plan for what actually physically has to happen if it's, well, we're not sure, and okay, now it's going to be this. So by the time we're certain, it might be too late to actually do the physical things that have to happen to make it happen, I guess, is my biggest working concern here.
I think we need to defer to Sarah. on what she thinks too.
I think we need to decide on a date. I will come whatever date you pick.
You're fine with any date?
I'm fine with any date because I don't think there is a good date. I think they're all bad dates. So just pick the worst date that's the best.
The worst one.
Pick the best of the worst.
What about you, Nancy?
I don't think it's going to be any different in August than it is in late June, and I don't necessarily think the fall is going to be any better, and it gets complicated with the school. So we have to have this meeting. I mean, none of us want to have this meeting. We didn't have to have town meeting. I would say let's not have it. Let's just skip 2020 altogether and go to 2021, but I don't think we have that option. So let's pick a date, make the best of it, and hopefully we'll get a little trust if we do enough public outreach and education. We can pare it down, do a call, eliminate a bunch of articles, get those passed, then do the critical ones, pass over the ones that aren't critical that get called anyway. Nobody's going to be happy. I just think we need to be prepared for that.
I think we should probably defer to Nancy on which of those end of June dates makes the most sense logistically.
Sorry, I think logistically, I think it would be better for us to skip ahead a week and do the week of June 29th, which Monday or Tuesday, the 29th or 30th. I know that's getting close to 4th of July, whatever that is going to be this year. Who knows? It's usually better for us to have a little time to certify the election in between, scan all the votes and such that we have to do. But if the board prefers the week, anytime during the week of June 22nd, we can absolutely do that. It's going to be a pared down meeting. We'll be on for it completely as we would for an August date. I don't know. I reached out to Mark Feit yesterday for he's Option Technologies, the handheld voting company. He is available some dates mid-August, but yesterday after our morning meeting, I had emailed him again with about 6 June dates. I've given him so many dates lately, and he hasn't gotten back to me yet. So I don't know if we'll be able to have that, but we can certainly have a meeting. And if it's a pared down meeting, I suppose it doesn't really matter if we have the.
I mean, I would ideally like to see us do a meeting with the electronic voting, because if we have people in different rooms, it's much easier to record it, essentially. So, I mean, I would kind of defer to what dates he's available. Nancy?
If I could also add one last thing, and the Boys and Girls Club hasn't been fully evaluated for our use or the dates, but the late June dates are very possible there because they're not planning to open till July 1st if they're allowed to have camp. And a mid-August date is also possible there. And we have to vet that site, but I'm just throwing it out there because it's air conditioned and it's a big room.
I mean, just as an odd perspective, I mean, if I remember correctly, John Giorgio, there's no quorum requirement for annual town meeting, correct?
Yes.
So like 10 people showed up, that would be enough.
Yes.
It may sound undemocratic, but if we do one of these forums the way Libby described, explain to the population that we're only going to cover 15 or 20 articles. They're critical for the financial operation of the town. Don't come, or we would like 50 people to come. I mean, the meeting, I would think, number one, not too many people are going to be very comfortable to come in the first place, given how close it is to the right now. You want the meeting to last about 30 minutes. I mean, I don't know quite how you would communicate that, but personally, I'd be a lot more comfortable with 50 people in the auditorium than with 500. And
well, Joe, one way we might be able to signal that is by not all attending. I mean, you might not need all of the FinCom there, for example. If we all know how we're going to vote on the few articles that we select to be heard at the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of what I tried to get at earlier, was maybe we can set it up in such a way that everyone is so comfortable of exactly how it's going to happen that they don't feel they need to show up. And maybe we do something where just the chair and vice chair of each board shows up or something.
Right. And you end up with 15 or 20 people in the room, and you get the official business completed in 15 or 20 minutes, and it's over. And it's a special situation given the times and the COVID emergency.
That would be the ideal situation. And I mean, this is being televised right now, so maybe we are starting to communicate the idea. Sarah?
I just want to mention, I wanted to say I agree with you. We really, if we're going to have multiple rooms, we're going to need that electronic voting. Otherwise, this meeting is going to be very difficult to manage. And then the second thing is, there's no way there's going to be 500 people in that auditorium with social distancing. I think we were talking when we were meeting in our group, we still need to space it out, but it didn't seem like it was going to be more than 300 in that room, just so you know. And that would be probably a maximum number. That's why the multiple rooms.
Christy?
I was going to suggest, if we want to go with the electronic voting, then maybe we have Nancy go back and see what's available between June 22nd and June 30th and have that kind of set our date.
Matt?
Yeah, if we're trying to get 15 to 50 people, I think the electronic voting is not necessary. It would save us some money, and we can test it when we actually have a real town meeting again. I see no reason in bringing them over and in trying to do something if we're trying to keep the numbers down.
John?
So if you're talking about between June 22nd and June 30th, I'm just going to remind everyone that one option would be your town meeting on June 22nd and your town election on June 30th, so that everybody would have the benefit of the debate at town meeting to the extent they show up or tune in to town meeting. They would be more informed about the election, the ballot questions.
Nancy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm all for that. If we do it in that order, that's absolutely fine with me. I'll do whatever the boards want, but I just wanted to point out that the June 16th date is out there. The ballots have been ordered with that date, which is fine. I think we're allowed to use them no matter what date we have.
Correct.
People have been told that is the date.
Libby? Thoughts?
I'm just going to say that, as Nancy said, we've sort of thought we had settled on June 16th, which does not mean we can't change it. It could be changed. And I like the idea that John is trying to get at, to try to reverse the order here. The only thing that I see as an issue with that is we're going to have more people now if we are going to be, and this is again a policy decision to bring up, if we're going to be doing those articles that also have ballot questions, the big ticket items, we're probably going to have more people.
I would just throw out there that I agree. I don't think we should be debating those big spending articles if we're trying to get people to not show up because we're doing the bare minimum and the outcome is pretty much already clear. And maybe we would change the FinCom motions to table those articles till the fall or postpone them to the fall. And then if they pass, then we discuss them. And if they don't pass, then maybe we even rethink how we want to approach them in the fall or next year, next annual. Ryan?
One thing that we should keep in mind I'm all for doing the annual town meeting before the election to have the discussion before people go to the voting booth. Having the election beforehand would, if we had the annual town meeting after, would give us the ability to change before June 30th if the override for Island Home were to not pass the election. if we reverse the order and it were to pass the at annual town meeting but fail the next day at the election, we're talking about potentially not having a fall town meeting or pushing it off into the annual town meeting. We would be essentially forcing ourselves into having a town meeting to fix a budgetary gap that would have to be fixed before we could set a tax rate. And so that would potentially, if we were to have the annual town meeting on the 28th and the election, or 29th and the election on the 30th, if an override question that's on the ballot, on the warrant, were to pass that but fail at the ballot the next day, we would have to, we'd have to have some type of meeting to, or another election to try to convince people to do it before we'd be able to set a tax rate. So it's something to think about as we navigate through this.
Denise. Oh, you're muted. Muted.
If this was Brian Land, Brian, how would you do it then?
Well, I don't like to do it typically the way that we're doing it, kind of with the election first on the 16th and then the annual town meeting, because I'm a very large proponent of having the discussion before people go into the ballot box to vote. But if we're talking about not being able to have a special or other concerns about August, September, October, and then even pushing all of that stuff into the next annual town meeting, it really would potentially, and probably need to talk to more John how we would deal with it, but we would not be able to set a tax rate under those circumstances until the budget was balanced. And now we could certainly delay actual tax bills to the May timeframe and set a tax rate even after into January or February, but it would still we'd be required to do something to balance it. So it might force us into another special town meeting in months that we're talking about potentially not wanting to do them because of whatever circumstances. It's just, I guess in this circumstance, I would prefer to keep it the way it is, as much as I don't think it's the best approach for ballot questions. But obviously it's up to the recommendation to the select board and what they ultimately want to do.
Thanks, Brian.
Libby?
Brian, I agree with you. But also the reality is it could fail anyway.
Okay, I'm hearing general consent. Oh, Sarah?
Well, I just wanted to ask, does anyone really think that anyone's going to vote for a big money article in these times? I mean, I just don't picture it. People are really suffering. I don't know that has really been acknowledged. I just can't imagine people voting for what will be seen as unnecessary big money items in this particular economic climate.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm generally hearing a consensus that we go forth with the election on the 16th. We set a date for sometime that last week of June for town meeting, and we continue to reevaluate how we're going to handle it. And we come up with a plan for the absolute minimum articles that could be discussed and try to set up the webinar. Is that generally where we're at? And get all of the people who've submitted articles onto that webinar. And I mean, I'd like to at least have the election out of the way. And I think that, and we do have some other big unknowns, like with maybe the airport can figure something out. But again, I'm not sure that it's going to be any better pushing it later in the summer. It could be a worse time to be having a town meeting. But okay, I'm seeing thumbs up for most people. Jill, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to underscore what you said. I think what everyone is sort of saying is we also don't want to have this, it's already an unnerving time. And I think we've got to be careful about what it is that you do have on the list, because you don't want people to say, well, the airport's more important than our island home, or vice versa. So I am a little nervous about that, even more so than about the social distancing aspect. And just to further the issue, the election first, I think it should come first, because I do think people will feel more comfortable going to the ballot than town meeting. So I feel like it's a chance for them to express their views, and maybe then they'll hold back at town meeting without us feeling like we're leaning on them to tell them not to come, which I'm really uncomfortable with. I mean, it just goes against everything I believe in. So,
yeah.
That is not, I just don't think in the long run that's a good message for the town to say, we're having town meeting, but don't come.
Yeah, it's painful to say that. But we, for the election, early voting is allowed too, right, Nancy? So that is really helpful. Jason, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I have to go in a second. I just want to say I'm fine with election the 16th and whatever date we go, 20th or 27th for the annual town meeting. I think only if we do like some ultra public outreach, maybe it's 2 community forums, see people understand really what's happening. I mean, we all know that we think we're getting the message out, and then you run into somebody who didn't get the message or doesn't understand it, and then misinformation happens and it kind of spirals out of control. So if we can really be diligent on the public outreach, I think we can pull this off and push everything off to the fall and try to do it with 50 or 100 people, and not say don't come, but say if it's clear that this is what's happening right here, and we've all voted on it, and we've all said it publicly, and it's in the paper and done videos and community forums, then people might feel comfortable not coming.
Good way to say it. Do we have a general game plan?
So maybe we put this on the next board agenda, the 20th, and outline kind of the stuff we've talked about with a final recommendation for that. I hear what Matt's saying about let's not waste a bunch of money bringing e-voting over if we're only going to have 50 people or 100 people. The problem is we don't know that. And I don't know, if Nancy, if we can maybe sort of tentatively hold a date with Option Technologies. And as we get a little closer, I don't know, maybe we can release that date or something like that. Like, I'd hate to not have him, and then, but also we're going to have to be prepared for some number of rooms, not just the auditorium, I think. So if we have the auditorium and the gyms, say, and then maybe, I don't even know, one other backup.
The LGI.
Yeah, maybe the LGI, maybe even the cafeterias. If we have all, and of course, all of that is going to need their own setup in every single room with alternate moderators and alternate clerks. We've talked about a whole bunch of things that logistically to help with this. And it's probably better to have all of that in place and then get to town meeting and find that there's only 50 people there, and then we don't have to do all that stuff. But it would be much worse to have it be the other way around.
Matt?
And I think if the finance committee and the select board, if everyone is voting unanimously, if we pare the list down and we get rid of anything that's controversial that we can, and then I think we're fine. I'm with Jason. You message that we're doing the absolute minimum. We've taken away anything that we couldn't agree with 100%, that I'm comfortable with 50 people, and then I wouldn't want to be spending the money on the technology. But if we can't pare it down and there's going to be 300 people trying to do what they do, then all bets are off. But I think it's going to come down to sort of leadership and picking the right articles so that we don't have to, don't have something controversial that brings everybody out.
Okay. Jill?
Sorry, just one last thing. Just to underscore that, that's sort of my issue about what's going to be on there, because if there's spending increases on there, is that going to drive out a lot more people? And I think that's, even if there's just $1 increase, I think people might be mad and turn out. So we might get a bigger turnout. I don't know.
I think we kind of need the backup of having the electronic voting in place. I mean, unless it's something, I don't know how we're going to know how many people are going to show up. And are we keeping everybody safer if even 50 people show up and we put every 10 people in each room, and then do the clicker voting so that everything's recorded well? I don't know. I don't like the idea of even 300 people in the same room in that auditorium. That seems like a lot with proper social distancing. And Michael Kozart saying 200, I think. I mean, I'd like to be more like 50, and then maybe some people in other rooms if necessary.
That would be my guess. I can't imagine 300 people are going to want to get together in the auditorium, but maybe.
Nancy?
I was just gonna, I can't imagine it either, 300 people, but it's the conundrum that we face. We don't want to tell people, of course they can come. It's an open town meeting. It's just balancing it the right way. It's just hard to know. And as far as the e-voting, I did ask him yesterday in an email, as I mentioned, for several other dates in late June, and I'm sure he'll get back to me tomorrow. Usually, I think I have an email from him right now. I can read it. But the other thing I just wanted to throw out there is that they've been very understanding and nice to work with. They do a lot of Massachusetts towns, but we did have a contract with them, which I haven't looked at in a while. And it's possible that or likely that we're contractually obligated this fiscal year, which doesn't mean that they won't allow us to extend it to the next fiscal year. But I just wanted to put that possibility out there.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I'm losing a quorum because Christy had to jump off and Jason's got to go now. But I think we have general consensus. Do you need a vote? Okay. So we'll just wait for a little bit more information and put this on for the 20th. Good. Okay. I guess we're kind of adjourned by default because we just lost a quorum.
Motion to adjourn on FinCom. All in favor?
To adjourn.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice to see you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Likewise. Bye.
Bye.
Who's here to help me convey this